Hello and welcome to the 67 Sleepy Facts channel. Tonight isn't about botany or diagrams or memorizing facts. It's about noticing small things that usually pass quietly in the background of life. The way flowers communicate without sound. The way bees remember kindness. The way sunlight turns into scent and then into honey and then disappears. You don't need to stay awake for all of this. You don't need to remember any of it. Just let the thoughts arrive, linger for a moment, and fade. Because flowers don't bloom in order, and neither do thoughts, especially at night. Before we begin, if this feels like your corner of the internet, consider the YouTube rituals. We are working on a 5-hour-long video on Cosmos, and it will be released as a 10 subscribers special. Anyways, take a breath, and let's begin. It's strange that flowers put so much effort into something that only lasts a few days, almost like they're designed to be remembered, not to stay. A rose might take weeks to develop, building its structure cell by cell, drawing nutrients from the soil, converting sunlight into the architecture of petals. All that work, all that energy, for maybe 3 days of bloom before the edges start to brown and curl. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the brevity is what makes it matter. Permanence doesn't demand attention the way fragility does. A flower that lasted forever would become invisible, just another piece of the landscape. But something that exists only briefly, that opens for a moment and then is gone, that makes you stop. That makes you look. The flower isn't trying to stay. It's trying to be unforgettable in the small window it has. Some flowers only release their scent at night, as if they know someone out there is awake when they shouldn't be. Night-blooming jasmine, moonflower, evening primrose, they wait until the sun sets and the world quiets down before they offer anything. During the day, they're unremarkable, closed or scentless, easy to walk past without noticing. But when darkness comes, they release their fragrance into the air, thick and sweet, filling spaces that daylight flowers ignore. It's not random. Night-blooming flowers are pollinated by moths, bats, and nocturnal insects, creatures that navigate by scent in the dark. But there's something else about it, something that feels intentional in a way that goes beyond biology. Those flowers bloom for the insomniacs, the night shift workers, the people sitting alone at 3 in the morning, wondering if anyone else is awake. The flowers are. They've been waiting. Bees don't just collect nectar. They remember which flowers were kind to them before. A bee will return to the same type of flower, even the same individual plant, if it provided good nectar in the past. They navigate using landmarks, the sun's position, and an internal map that scientists are still trying to fully understand. But it's more than navigation. It's memory. A bee knows the difference between a flower that gave generously and one that didn't. They learn, they compare, they make decisions based on experience. It's not instinct alone. It's something closer to preference, maybe even trust. The bee remembers which flowers treated it well, and it goes back. There's a relationship there, quiet and unspoken, built on consistency and sweetness. The flower offers, the bee remembers, and both of them rely on that. Honey is sunlight that took a long way around before reaching you. A bee visits a flower and collects nectar, which is essentially sugar water the plant made through photosynthesis, converting light into energy. The bee brings that nectar back to the hive, where it's passed between workers, enzymes breaking it down, moisture evaporating, until it becomes honey, thick, golden, preserved. When you eat honey, you're tasting sunlight that touched a flower weeks or months ago, that was carried by a bee, stored in wax, sealed away. Its light transformed so many times that it doesn't resemble light anymore, but that's still what it is. Energy from the sun, filtered through petals, processed by insects, waiting in a jar. It's the most indirect way to consume sunlight, and somehow it tastes better for it. A flower doesn't bloom because it's the right season. It blooms because everything lined up at once, and that moment might never happen again. Temperature, daylight length, moisture levels, soil nutrients, all of it has to be right. A plant monitors its environment constantly, sensing shifts in light, changes in temperature, the presence or absence of water. When all the signals say, now, the flower blooms. But if any one of those factors is off, if the timing doesn't align perfectly, the bloom doesn't happen. The plant waits. Sometimes it waits another year. Sometimes it never blooms at all. There's no guarantee. The flower is a response to a very specific moment in time, a convergence of conditions that may not repeat. It's not seasonal, it's opportunistic. The flower opens when the world allows it, and if the world doesn't allow it, the flower stays closed.
There are flowers that smell unpleasant on purpose. Beauty isn't always the goal, survival is. The corpse flower, Stapelia, Rafflesia, they reek of rotting meat, decay, things you'd walk away from if you encountered them in the wild. But that smell isn't a mistake, it's strategy. These flowers are pollinated by flies and beetles that feed on carrion, insects that are drawn to death. So the flower mimics death. It produces the chemical compounds of decay, creating a scent profile that says something died here. The insects arrive expecting a meal and end up covered in pollen instead. The flower doesn't care that humans find it repulsive. Humans aren't the target. The flower knows exactly who it's calling to, and it speaks their language fluently. Beauty is subjective. Effectiveness is not. Some plants bloom once in their entire life and then die, as if they were waiting for that single moment. Agave, bamboo, certain species of palms, they can live for years, even decades, growing slowly, building energy reserves, developing root systems, all without a single flower. And then, one day, they bloom, spectacularly, exhaustively. They pour everything they have into producing flowers and seeds, and when it's done, the plant dies. Not from disease, not from damage, just from spending everything it had. It's called monocarpic reproduction, and it seems almost tragic from a human perspective. All that time, all that growth for one bloom. But maybe it's not tragic. Maybe it's just focused. The plant knew what it was saving for. It waited until it had enough, and then it gave everything. No second chances, no holding back. Just one perfect, complete act of creation, and then rest. Nectar sometimes contains tiny amounts of caffeine, gently encouraging pollinators to come back, not forcing, just persuading. Citrus flowers, coffee blossoms, certain species of orchids, they spike their nectar with caffeine in concentrations too low to harm, but high enough to affect behavior. Bees that drink caffeinated nectar become better at remembering that specific flower. The caffeine enhances their memory, making them more likely to return, more likely to recognize the flower from a distance. It's subtle. The flower isn't addicting the bee, just making itself a little more memorable. It's the difference between a suggestion and a command. The bee still has a choice, but the flower has made its case a little more convincing. It's manipulation, but it's gentle, a nudge, not a shove. And the bee, with its enhanced memory, comes back, and the flower gets pollinated, and everyone wins. The flower just made sure it wouldn't be forgotten.
Flowers don't know they're beautiful. That idea only exists in human minds. A rose doesn't look at itself and think, I'm stunning. A lotus doesn't take pride in its symmetry. The colors, the shapes, the arrangements of petals, none of it exists for aesthetic appreciation. It exists for pollination, for survival, for reproduction. The flower is the shape it is because that shape works. The colors attract the right insects. The scent signals readiness. But humans see it and call it beautiful, and that label is ours, not the flower's. The flower has no concept of beauty. It has no concept of anything. It just is. And maybe that's the most beautiful part. The rose doesn't try to be lovely. It's simply structured in a way that happens to move us, and it does that without thought, without intention, without ever knowing the effect it has. A field of flowers subtly changes the air itself. You're not imagining that it feels different. Flowers release volatile organic compounds, molecules that evaporate into the air and create the scents we associate with blooms. But those compounds don't just smell, they also affect the chemistry of the air around them. In a field full of flowers, the air has a different composition than it would have otherwise. More oxygen in some cases, different humidity levels, a cocktail of organic molecules floating in suspension. When you walk through a flowering meadow and feel like you can breathe easier, like the air is softer, that's not metaphor, that's chemistry. The flowers have changed the atmosphere in a small but measurable way. You're not imagining it. The field is doing something to the air, and the air is doing something to you, and the flowers are the reason. Bees can tell when nectar is running low and will quietly stop visiting, without drama, without resentment. A flower that's been pollinated often stops producing nectar, redirecting its energy towards seed development instead. The bee arrives, checks the flower, finds it empty or nearly empty, and moves on. No wasted effort, no frustration. The bee doesn't take it personally. It simply adjusts its route, crossing that flower off the list and focusing on others. There's an efficiency to it, a pragmatism that feels almost businesslike. The bee and the flower had an arrangement. The arrangement has ended. Both parties move forward. There's no bitterness in nature, no sense of betrayal when the nectar runs out. Just information, just adjustment. The bee finds new flowers, the flower develops seeds, and life continues without conflict. It's a transaction that knows when it's done.
Some flowers warm themselves while blooming, creating their own heat just to spread their scent farther. Skunk cabbage, certain philodendrons, and lotus flowers can generate temperatures up to 15 or 20 degrees warmer than the surrounding air. They do this through thermogenesis, essentially burning stored carbohydrates to produce heat. The heat helps volatilize scent molecules, sending them farther into the air, attracting pollinators from greater distances. But it also serves another purpose. In cold climates, skunk cabbage can melt through snow, blooming while the ground is still frozen. The heat creates a microclimate around the flower, a small pocket of warmth in an otherwise cold world. The flower is making its own environment, refusing to wait for the world to accommodate it. It generates heat, it spreads scent, it blooms on its own terms. The flower isn't passive, it's an engine. Petals are fragile by design. Strength would be wasted there. A petal's job is to attract, to signal, to present the reproductive parts of the flower in a way that draws pollinators in. It doesn't need to last. It doesn't need to withstand force. It needs to be visible, colorful, sometimes scented, and then it needs to get out of the way so the seeds can develop. So petals are thin, delicate, easily torn. They bruise at a touch, wilt quickly, fall at the slightest wind. But that's not a flaw, that's efficiency. The plant doesn't waste resources on making petals durable because durability isn't the goal. The goal is temporary visibility. The petal is an advertisement, and once the sale is made, the ad is no longer needed. The fragility is intentional. Strength would be wasted there. Flowers don't compete loudly. They rely on timing, color, scent, and patience. In a meadow full of blooms, each flower is technically in competition with every other flower for pollinator attention, but they don't fight, they differentiate. One blooms earlier, another later, One is bright red, another pale yellow. One releases scent at dawn, another at dusk. They occupy different niches in time and space and sensory experience, carving out their own small territories without confrontation. It's competition, but it's quiet. The flower that blooms 2 weeks earlier than its neighbor doesn't win because it's stronger. It wins because it was there first. The flower that smells like carrion doesn't beat the flower that smells like vanilla. It just attracts a different pollinator. There's no loud struggle, no dramatic contest, just small adjustments, subtle differences, and the patience to wait for the right moment.
The color you see in a flower isn't the color an insect sees. You're never seeing the same thing. Many flowers have ultraviolet patterns on their petals, invisible to human eyes, but perfectly clear to bees and butterflies. Those patterns act as guides, pointing toward the center of the flower where the nectar and pollen are. To us, a flower might look like a uniform yellow. To a bee, that same flower has lines, spots, bullseyes, a map leading directly to the reward. We share the same space, the same flower, but we're experiencing completely different visual information. The flower isn't hiding anything from us, it's just not talking to us. It's talking to the bee. The flower has 2 appearances, one for us and one for them. And the one for them is the one that matters. Flowers don't face the sun because they like warmth. They're following energy. Heliotropism, the movement of plants toward light, isn't about preference or comfort. It's about maximizing photosynthesis. The flower turns so that its surface is perpendicular to the sun's rays, capturing as much light as possible. Light is fuel. The plant needs it to produce sugars, to grow, to build the structures it needs to survive and reproduce. So it tracks the sun across the sky, moving gradually, imperceptibly, adjusting its angle throughout the day. By the time the sun sets, the flower has turned almost completely. By dawn, it's reset, ready to start again. It's not admiration, it's not affection, it's necessity. The flower faces the sun because the sun is energy, and energy is life. Some flowers grow underground first, then surface briefly like a thought rising and disappearing. Certain orchids and mycoheterotrophic plants develop their root systems in darkness, drawing nutrients from fungi or decaying organic matter, growing entirely beneath the soil. They might stay underground for years, and then, when conditions are right, they send up a flower stalk, bloom for a few days, maybe a week, and then retreat back underground. The bloom is an eruption, a brief emergence into the visible world before sinking back into invisibility. Most of the plant's life happens where no one can see it. The bloom is the exception, not the rule. It surfaces, does what it needs to do, and then disappears, like a thought that crosses your mind at 3 in the morning, vivid and complete, and then gone before you can fully grasp it.
Flowers close themselves when touched, like a reflex to protect what little moisture they have. Mimosa pudica, the sensitive plant, folds its leaves inward when touched, and some flowers do the same when handled or when conditions aren't right. It's a response to stimuli, a protective mechanism. When the flower closes, it reduces the surface area exposed to air, slowing moisture loss, guarding pollen, creating a barrier. It's not pain. Plants don't feel pain the way animals do, but they react to touch, to pressure, to disturbance. The flower closes because something has threatened its stability, and closing is the best defense it has. The response is automatic, almost instantaneous, a reflex built into the structure of the plant. It's not thinking, it's protecting. And when the threat passes, the flower opens again, resuming its position, waiting for the next disturbance. Bees can recognize individual flowers the way humans recognize familiar places. A bee doesn't just see color and shape, it maps landmarks, notes details, remembers specific locations.
A bee can return to the same flower day after day, even if there are hundreds of similar flowers nearby. It recognizes that specific bloom, that exact plant, based on visual cues we don't fully understand. It's spatial memory combined with pattern recognition, the kind of cognitive work we usually associate with much larger brains. But the bee does it with a brain the size of a pinhead. It knows where it's been, it knows what worked, and it goes back. The flower isn't interchangeable to the bee. The bee sees individuals, not just species. Each flower is its own place, its own memory, its own small landmark in the bee's mental map of the world. Nectar isn't just food, it's communication. The composition of nectar, the ratio of sugars, the presence of amino acids, secondary compounds, all of it carries information. A flower with high sucrose nectar attracts different pollinators than a flower with high glucose nectar. Some flowers change their nectar composition after being pollinated, signaling to insects that the flower is no longer worth visiting. Other flowers add defensive compounds to their nectar, deterring certain insects while still rewarding others. The nectar is a message. It says, "I have food," but it also says, "This is who I'm talking to," and "This is what I need from you," and "I've already been pollinated, move along." The flower and the pollinator are having a conversation in chemistry, and the nectar is the language.
A jar of honey represents thousands of small trips that no one ever watched happen. A single bee might visit 50 to 100 flowers in one foraging trip. That bee makes multiple trips a day. A hive contains thousands of bees, all flying similar routes, all bringing back nectar, all contributing to the same collective store. To produce 1 pound of honey, bees fly roughly 55,000 miles combined. That's more than twice around the Earth. And all of it happens in increments so small that any individual trip is invisible. A bee lands on a flower, collects nectar, flies back. Another bee does the same, and another and another. No one watches, no one records it, but the jar fills anyway, ounce by ounce, the product of thousands of hours of work no one ever acknowledged. The honey doesn't care that the work was invisible. It exists because of the work. The jar is proof that small efforts repeated endlessly create something substantial. Some flowers bloom even when no pollinator ever arrives. They still open. The flower has no way of knowing whether a bee or a butterfly or a moth will show up. It can't predict the future. It can only respond to the conditions that trigger blooming, temperature and light and moisture. And when those conditions are met, the flower opens, even if no pollinator comes. Even if the flower wilts without being fertilized, it still bloomed. It still tried. There's something both sad and beautiful about that. A flower opening in a place no pollinator can reach, offering nectar that will never be taken, pollen that will never be carried away. It blooms anyway, because blooming is what it does. The flower doesn't wait for certainty, it acts on possibility. And sometimes the possibility doesn't happen, and the flower fades, and that's just how it goes. Plants remember stress. A drought years ago can still change how a flower opens today. Plants don't have brains, but they have something like memory. When a plant experiences stress, drought, heat, cold, lack of nutrients, it activates certain genes and produces specific proteins. Some of those changes are temporary, but some are epigenetic, meaning they alter how genes are expressed without changing the DNA itself. Those alterations can persist, affecting how the plant grows, how it allocates resources, how and when it blooms. A plant that survived a drought might bloom earlier the next year, or produce fewer flowers, or develop deeper roots. It's not making a conscious decision, it's responding to stored information, a biological memory of past hardship. The plant remembers in its own way and adjusts accordingly. The memory isn't emotional, it's structural, but it's there.
Root systems communicate underground through networks of fungi. Plants share resources with their neighbors, even competitors when times are hard. Mycorrhizal fungi connect the roots of multiple plants, creating what scientists call the wood wide web. Through this network, plants can transfer sugars, nitrogen, water, even chemical signals. A tree under stress might receive nutrients from nearby trees. A sapling in deep shade might be fed by its parent plant or by neighbors. The network doesn't discriminate. Plants that would normally compete for resources will support each other through the fungal network, sharing what they have when one plant needs it. It's cooperation at the root level, invisible, underground, happening constantly. The forest isn't just a collection of individual plants, it's a community, interconnected, interdependent, sharing resources in ways that humans didn't even know about until recently. Some flowers only bloom for a few hours. Blink and you've missed an entire life cycle. Morning glories open at dawn and close by midday. Night-blooming cereus flowers bloom for just one night, opening in the evening and wilting by morning. The window is tiny. If you're not paying attention, if you're not there at the right time, you miss it entirely. The flower doesn't wait for you. It doesn't extend its bloom just because no one was watching. It opens, it exists, it closes, and that's it. The brevity isn't a flaw, it's the design. The flower does everything it needs to do in those few hours. Attract pollinators, facilitate fertilization, begin the process of seed development. It's efficient, it's complete, and then it's over. The flower doesn't need more time. The time it had was enough. Plants lean toward light, not because they want to, but because cells on the shadowed side grow faster, pushing them forward. It looks like choice, but it's chemistry. Phototropism happens because of a hormone called auxin, which accumulates on the shaded side of the plant. Auxin promotes cell elongation, so the cells on the dark side grow longer than the cells on the light side, causing the plant to bend toward the light source. The plant isn't deciding to move toward light, it's responding to a chemical gradient. The movement is automatic, the result of growth patterns, not intention, but it looks intentional. It looks like the plant is reaching for something, striving toward the sun, making an effort, and in a way, it is, just not consciously. The plant is structured to grow toward light because light is survival. The process is mechanical, but the outcome is adaptive. A flower opening is quiet work. No movement fast enough to notice unless you wait. You can watch a flower for an hour and see nothing. And then you look away, and when you look back, it's different. The petals have shifted. The bloom has opened a little more. It's happening constantly, but so slowly that it's invisible in real time. You only notice the change, not the process. Time-lapse footage reveals the movement, the petals unfolding like something stretching after sleep, but in real time it's imperceptible. The flower is moving, growing, changing every second, but you have to be patient enough to notice. It's a reminder that not everything worth seeing happens quickly. Some of the most important movements are the ones you can't see at all unless you're willing to wait. Flowers don't rush, even though their time is limited. A flower that blooms for 3 days doesn't spend those 3 days in a panic. It opens when it's ready, stays open for as long as it can, and closes when it's done. There's no urgency, no sense of racing against time. The flower exists in the present, doing what it does without anxiety about the future or regret about how short its life is. It doesn't know it's temporary. It doesn't know anything. It just is, fully, completely, for however long it lasts. And when it's over, it's over. The flower doesn't cling. It doesn't try to extend its bloom by force of will. It simply lives its brief life fully, and then lets go. No rushing, no resistance, just presence. Every flower is a risk the plant decided was worth taking. Producing a flower is expensive. It costs energy, resources, nutrients that could have been used for growth or storage. The plant diverts those resources into creating petals, nectar, pollen, all in the hope that a pollinator will show up and fertilization will occur. But there's no guarantee. The pollinator might not come. The flower might bloom at the wrong time, in the wrong place. The energy might be wasted. And yet, the plant does it anyway. Because the potential payoff, successful reproduction, seeds that will grow into new plants, is worth the risk. The flower is a gamble. The plant is betting its resources on the possibility of future generations. Sometimes the bet pays off, sometimes it doesn't. But without the risk, there's no possibility at all.
Honey never spoils, which feels unfair for something made from something so temporary. Archaeologists have found pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs, thousands of years old, still edible. Honey is hygroscopic, meaning it contains very little water and absorbs moisture from its surroundings rather than releasing it. Bacteria and microorganisms need water to grow, and honey doesn't provide that. It's also acidic, with a pH low enough to inhibit microbial growth. So honey sits, sealed in a jar, chemically stable, indefinitely preserved. It was made from flowers that lived and died in a matter of days, by bees that lived for weeks, and yet the honey lasts longer than stone. It's the most durable product of the most fragile process. It doesn't decay, it doesn't mold, it just waits indefinitely. Flowers don't bloom in order. Neither do thoughts. In a garden, blooms appear scattered, unpredictable. One flower here, another there, no clear progression or pattern. You can plant seeds in a row, all the same species, all in the same conditions, and they'll still bloom at different times. One opens early, another late. Some never open at all. There's variation, randomness, responses to factors you can't see or control. Thoughts are the same. They don't arrive in logical sequence. They appear when they're ready, unannounced, sometimes unwelcome. You can't force a flower to bloom on schedule, and you can't force an idea to arrive on demand. Both happen when they happen. Both require patience. Both have their own timing, independent of what you want or need. The scent of flowers exists mostly for someone else, not for you. The fragrances flowers produce are chemical signals designed to attract pollinators or, in some cases, repel herbivores. The scent is functional, not decorative. When you smell a rose, you're intercepting a message that wasn't meant for you. The rose is calling to a bee, a butterfly, something with the right biology to detect and respond to that specific mixture of volatile compounds. You benefit from it accidentally. The scent is pleasant to you, but that's coincidental. The rose doesn't care if you like how it smells. It cares if the pollinator shows up. You're eavesdropping on a conversation between a flower and an insect, finding beauty in something that was never about beauty at all.
Certain orchids mimic the appearance of female insects so precisely that males attempt to mate with them. The flower doesn't apologize for the deception, it just continues. The orchid produces the right colors, the right shapes, even the right pheromones, recreating the sexual signals of a female insect so convincingly that males are fooled. They land on the flower, attempt to mate, and in the process get covered in pollen. They leave, frustrated, and visit another flower, transferring pollen and enabling fertilization. The orchid has tricked the insect, exploited its biology, used its reproductive drive for the orchid's own purposes. It's manipulative, it's effective, and the orchid doesn't care that the insect was deceived. The orchid needed pollination, it got pollination. The method is irrelevant. A single dandelion can produce up to 2,000 seeds. Most will never grow. The plant knows this and releases them anyway. Each seed has a tiny parachute, a structure called a pappus that lets it drift on the wind. The seeds spread across fields, lawns, parking lots, wherever the wind takes them. Most land in places where they can't survive, too dry, too shaded, too crowded, too compacted. They die without sprouting. But a few, just a few, land somewhere suitable. They root, they grow, they become dandelions. And those few are enough. The plant doesn't mourn the seeds that fail. It produces so many that failure is built into the strategy. Most will die. That's expected. That's the point. The dandelion bets on volume, on sheer numbers, and it works. Petals fall in silence. No announcement, no ceremony. One moment they're there, and then they're not. A breeze comes, or the flower dries out, or the structure weakens and the petal detaches. It drifts to the ground, joins the others, begins to decay. There's no sound, no marker, no recognition. The petal was part of the flower, and now it's not. The transition is seamless, unremarkable, inevitable. The flower continues without it, or the flower fades entirely, and either way, the petal is gone. It did what it was supposed to do. It attracted attention, it protected reproductive structures, and now it's done. There's no lingering, no attachment, just detachment, just the quiet inevitability of letting go.
When a flower fades, the plant hasn't failed. It has moved on. The petals wilt, the colors dull, the structure collapses. And to a human observer, it looks like death, like failure. But the plant is already working on the next phase. The flower was never meant to last. It was meant to facilitate pollination. And if pollination happened, the flower has done its job. Now the energy goes to seed development, to producing the next generation. The faded flower isn't a failure, it's a transition. The plant isn't mourning the loss of the bloom, it's building what comes next. The flower was just one stage. The plant is focused on the future, on seeds, on dispersal, on continuation. The wilted petals are evidence of success, not failure. Some trees wait decades before flowering, patient in a way humans can barely comprehend. They're not waiting for permission, they're waiting for readiness. Bamboo can grow for 50, 60, even 100 years without blooming. And then, when the conditions align, when the internal clock reaches a certain point, the entire population blooms at once, regardless of location, all synchronized. After blooming, many bamboo plants die. It's a strategy, a long-term investment in a single reproductive event. The tree isn't impatient. It doesn't wonder if it's taking too long. It just grows, year after year, building strength, storing resources until the moment is right. And then it blooms. Decades of waiting for one event. And the tree is fine with that. It knows something humans forget. Readiness takes as long as it takes. Moss grows without flowers, without drama, without asking to be noticed. It simply covers what's been left behind. Moss is quiet. It doesn't bloom, doesn't produce showy structures, doesn't attract pollinators. It reproduces through spores, spreading slowly, covering surfaces, creating soft green layers over rocks, wood, soil. It thrives in places other plants can't, in shade, in moisture, in neglect. Moss doesn't compete with flowers. It occupies a different space, a different strategy. It's not trying to be seen, it's trying to survive. And it does that by being small, by being patient, by covering what others have abandoned. Moss is the plant that shows up after everyone else has left, and it makes something beautiful out of what remains.
Certain orchids mimic the appearance of female insects so precisely that males attempt to mate with them. The flower doesn't apologize for the deception, it just continues. The orchid produces the right colors, the right shapes, even the right pheromones, recreating the sexual signals of a female insect so convincingly that males are fooled. They land on the flower, attempt to mate, and in the process get covered in pollen. They leave, frustrated, and visit another flower, transferring pollen and enabling fertilization. The orchid has tricked the insect, exploited its biology,
used its reproductive drive for the orchid's own purposes. It's manipulative, it's effective, and the orchid doesn't care that the insect was deceived. The orchid needed pollination, it got pollination. The method is irrelevant. A single dandelion can produce up to 2,000 seeds. Most will never grow. The plant knows this and releases them anyway. Each seed has a tiny parachute, a structure called a pappus that lets it drift on the wind. The seeds spread across fields, lawns, parking lots, wherever the wind takes them. Most land in places where they can't survive. Too dry, too shaded, too crowded, too compacted. They die without sprouting. But a few, just a few, land somewhere suitable. They root, they grow, they become dandelions. And those few are enough. The plant doesn't mourn the seeds that fail. It produces so many that failure is built into the strategy. Most will die. That's expected. That's the point. The dandelion bets on volume, on sheer numbers, and it works. Petals fall in silence. No announcement, no ceremony. One moment they're there, and then they're not. A breeze comes, or the flower dries out, or the structure weakens and the petal detaches. It drifts to the ground, joins the others, begins to decay. There's no sound, no marker, no recognition. The petal was part of the flower, and now it's not. The transition is seamless, unremarkable, inevitable. The flower continues without it, or the flower fades entirely, and either way, the petal is gone. It did what it was supposed to do. It attracted attention, it protected reproductive structures, and now it's done. There's no lingering, no attachment, just detachment, just the quiet inevitability of letting go.
Root systems communicate underground through networks of fungi. Plants share resources with their neighbors, even competitors, when times are hard. Mycorrhizal fungi connect the roots of multiple plants, creating what scientists call the wood wide web. Through this network, plants can transfer sugars, nitrogen, water, even chemical signals. A tree under stress might receive nutrients from nearby trees. A sapling in deep shade might be fed by its parent plant or by neighbors. The network doesn't discriminate. Plants that would normally compete for resources will support each other through the fungal network, sharing what they have when one plant needs it. It's cooperation at the root level, invisible, underground, happening constantly. The forest isn't just a collection of individual plants, it's a community, interconnected, interdependent, sharing resources in ways that humans didn't even know about until recently. Some flowers only bloom for a few hours. Blink and you've missed an entire life cycle. Morning glories open at dawn and close by midday. Night-blooming cereus flowers bloom for just one night, opening in the evening and wilting by morning. The window is tiny. If you're not paying attention, if you're not there at the right time, you miss it entirely. The flower doesn't wait for you. It doesn't extend its bloom just because no one was watching. It opens, it exists, it closes, and that's it. The brevity isn't a flaw, it's the design. The flower does everything it needs to do in those few hours. Attract pollinators, facilitate fertilization, begin the process of seed development. It's efficient, it's complete, and then it's over. The flower doesn't need more time. The time it had was enough. Plants lean toward light, not because they want to, but because cells on the shadowed side grow faster, pushing them forward. It looks like choice, but it's chemistry. Phototropism happens because of a hormone called auxin, which accumulates on the shaded side of the plant. Auxin promotes cell elongation, so the cells on the dark side grow longer than the cells on the light side, causing the plant to bend toward the light source. The plant isn't deciding to move toward light, it's responding to a chemical gradient. The movement is automatic, the result of growth patterns, not intention, but it looks intentional. It looks like the plant is reaching for something, striving toward the sun, making an effort, and in a way, it is, just not consciously. The plant is structured to grow toward light because light is survival. The process is mechanical, but the outcome is adaptive.
There are flowers that bloom only once every few years, waiting for conditions so specific that most people will never witness it. The Titan arum, sometimes called the corpse flower, blooms once every 7 to 10 years. When it does bloom, the event lasts only a day or two before the flower collapses. People travel to see it, setting alarms, rearranging schedules, because they know the next opportunity might be years away. The flower doesn't care about the audience. It blooms when it's ready, when it has enough stored energy, when the internal and external conditions align. And if no one is there to see it, the flower still blooms. The rarity isn't a performance, it's just biology. The flower needs years to gather resources, and it only releases them when it's certain the investment will pay off. A weed doesn't try to become a lily. It doesn't question what it is. A rose grows as a rose. It produces rose-shaped flowers, rose-scented oils, rose-specific structures. It doesn't look at a lily and think, maybe I should be taller, or maybe I should have more petals, or maybe I'm doing this wrong. The rose is a rose. That's all it knows. That's all it needs to know. There's no comparison, no inadequacy, no striving to be something other than what it is. The rose exists fully as itself, without question, without doubt. It doesn't wonder if it should be different. It just grows, blooms, produces seeds, and completes its life cycle as a rose. The simplicity of that is almost enviable. The rose doesn't need to figure out what it is. It already knows. Weeds are just plants growing where someone decided they shouldn't. The plant itself has no concept of being unwanted. A dandelion in a lawn, a thistle in a garden, wild morning glory climbing a fence. They're all just growing. They're not invading. They're not defiant. They're responding to available space, available light, available nutrients. The designation weed is human, a label applied based on context and preference. The same plant that's a weed in one place might be a crop in another. The plant doesn't know the difference. It just grows. And it grows wherever it can, taking advantage of disturbances, gaps, neglected spaces. Weeds are opportunists, but they're not malicious. They're just plants doing what plants do, growing where conditions allow it, indifferent to human plans. Pollen can travel hundreds of miles on the wind, carrying the genetic memory of a plant to places it will never see. Wind-pollinated plants release massive amounts of pollen, far more than they need, because most of it will never reach another flower. The pollen drifts, carried by air currents, rising into the atmosphere, traveling across landscapes. Some of it lands on water, some on soil, some on concrete. Only a tiny fraction lands on a compatible flower, but that tiny fraction is enough. The pollen that does reach a flower carries genetic information from the parent plant, enabling fertilization, creating seeds that combine traits from both parents. The pollen is a messenger, a carrier of information, sent out into the world with no control over where it lands. Most of the messages are lost, but some arrive, and those are the ones that matter. Some seeds remain dormant in soil for centuries, waiting for the exact conditions that will let them grow. Patience on a scale that outlives empires. Scientists have germinated seeds that were over 1,000 years old, pulled from archaeological sites, ancient storage jars, layers of sediment. The seeds were alive the entire time, metabolically active at an almost imperceptible level, waiting. They sense moisture, temperature, light, chemical signals from the soil. When all the factors align, when the conditions are right, the seed germinates. But until then, it waits. Decades, centuries, longer. The seed isn't dying, it's just not ready. It's holding on to the possibility of life, suspended in time, patient beyond comprehension. And when the moment comes, when the world finally says now, the seed responds. It grows. After all that waiting, it grows.
Trees drop their leaves not because they're dying, but because holding on would cost more than letting go. In autumn, deciduous trees withdraw nutrients from their leaves, pulling nitrogen, phosphorus, and other valuable resources back into the branches and trunk for storage. Once the nutrients are reclaimed, the leaves are expendable. The tree seals off the connection between the leaf and the branch, forming an abscission layer that eventually causes the leaf to fall. It's not decay, it's strategy. Keeping leaves through winter would cost energy, water, resources the tree can't afford to spend when photosynthesis isn't happening. So the tree lets go. It cuts its losses, conserves its resources, and waits for spring. The falling leaves aren't a sign of weakness, they're a sign of intelligent resource management. The tree knows what to hold on to and what to release. Flowers that grow in cracks in concrete aren't stubborn, they're just growing where there's space. A seed lands in a crack, finds moisture, finds a tiny pocket of soil or organic matter, and germinates. The concrete doesn't deter it because the seed doesn't know about concrete. It only knows whether conditions are suitable for growth. The crack provides enough space for roots, enough moisture, enough light, so the plant grows. It's not defying the concrete, it's utilizing the space the concrete left behind. The flower isn't fighting against its environment, it's adapting to it, finding opportunity in a place most plants can't reach. The crack is an ecological niche, and the flower is filling it. No stubbornness, just opportunism. Night-blooming jasmine releases its scent only after dark, filling the air with sweetness when no one's looking for it. During the day, the flowers are small, white, unremarkable, but at night they release one of the most powerful fragrances in the plant kingdom, sweet and intoxicating, spreading across gardens and streets. The scent is for nocturnal pollinators, moths primarily, that navigate by smell in the darkness. But the scent is so strong, so pervasive, that it reaches humans too. People walking at night, people sitting on porches, people unable to sleep, they all encounter it. The jasmine blooms for the moths, but the scent is generous, spilling over into the human world. It's a gift no one asked for, offered freely every night, whether anyone is there to receive it or not.
A bee's body is covered in tiny hairs that trap pollen without the bee even trying. Pollination happens by accident as much as by intent. The bee visits a flower to collect nectar, and in the process, pollen sticks to the hairs covering its body. The bee doesn't collect pollen on purpose, at least not initially. It's just a side effect of moving through the flower, brushing against stamens, navigating between petals. The pollen clings. When the bee visits the next flower, some of that pollen rubs off, landing on the stigma, enabling fertilization. The bee is doing this for food, for the hive, for survival, but the flower benefits. The bee is an accidental courier, carrying genetic material between plants without intending to. Pollination is a byproduct of hunger. The bee gets nectar, the flower gets pollinated. Neither one planned it, it just works. Some plants close their leaves at night, folding in on themselves like they're resting. It's called nyctinasty, and scientists still don't fully understand why. Legumes, prayer plants, oxalis, they all fold their leaves when darkness comes. The movement is controlled by changes in turgor pressure in cells at the base of the leaf, triggered by light and circadian rhythms. But the reason isn't entirely clear. Some theories suggest it reduces water loss, or conserves energy, or protects leaves from nighttime herbivores, but no single explanation covers all the plants that do it. The leaves fold, the plant rests, or appears to rest, and in the morning, the leaves unfold again, opening to the sun. It looks like sleep. It functions like rest. But whether the plant experiences anything like what we call sleep, we don't know. The leaves close. That's all we can say for certain. Lavender calms not just because of its scent, but because the compounds it releases actually slow your nervous system. The flower is doing something to you, quietly, without asking. Linalool and linalool acetate, two of the primary compounds in lavender oil, have measurable effects on the central nervous system. They reduce activity in the sympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for stress responses, and increase activity in the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for rest and relaxation. When you smell lavender, your body changes. Heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, cortisol levels decrease. It's not placebo, it's pharmacology. The flower is releasing chemicals that alter your physiology. It's subtle, it's gentle, but it's real. The lavender isn't trying to calm you, it's just existing. But the side effect of its existence is your relaxation.
Single fungi glow faintly in the dark, creating soft light in forests where no one walks. The glow serves a purpose, attracting insects, but it also just exists, whether witnessed or not. Bioluminescent fungi produce light through a chemical reaction involving luciferin, an enzyme, and oxygen. The light is greenish, faint, barely visible to human eyes unless the surroundings are completely dark. In some forests, fallen logs glow softly at night, covered in fungi emitting a pale luminescence. Insects are drawn to the light, landing on the fungi, picking up spores, spreading them to new locations. But the glow doesn't only exist when insects are present. It's constant, steady, happening every night in places no human ever sees. The fungi glow in empty forests, in deep wilderness, in places where the light will never be witnessed, and they keep glowing anyway. A single sunflower can produce up to 2,000 seeds, each one a potential future, most of which will never happen. The seeds are packed tightly in the flower head, arranged in spirals, following a mathematical pattern called the Fibonacci sequence. When the flower dries, the seeds loosen, fall, disperse. Birds eat them, squirrels collect them, wind scatters them. Most land in places where they can't grow, but a few find suitable soil, the right moisture, the right light. Those few germinate. They grow into sunflowers, and the cycle continues. The sunflower doesn't mourn the seeds that fail. It produces so many that failure is irrelevant. Potential is abundant. Realization is rare. But the sunflower keeps producing seeds, keeps offering futures, most of which will never be realized. And that's fine. That's the strategy. Plants don't sleep, but they rest. Photosynthesis slows at night. Growth happens in rhythms you can't see, but that are always there. Plants have circadian rhythms just like animals do. Gene expression changes throughout the day, peaking at certain times, dropping at others. Stomata, the tiny pores on leaves that allow gas exchange, often close at night to conserve water. Growth rates fluctuate, with some plants growing faster at night, others during the day. The plant is always doing something, but the activity shifts, ebbs and flows, follows patterns tied to light and darkness. It's not sleep, there's no unconsciousness, but there is rest, a slowing down, a shifting of resources and priorities. The plant doesn't stop, it just changes what it's doing, and that change follows a rhythm, predictable, consistent, built into the biology of the plant.
Cherry blossoms bloom for such a short time that entire cultures have built traditions around not missing them. The tree doesn't care, it blooms and moves on. In Japan, hanami, the practice of viewing cherry blossoms, is a centuries-old tradition. People gather under blooming trees, picnicking, celebrating, aware that the blossoms will be gone in a week or two. The trees bloom synchronously, all at once, covering landscapes in pale pink. And then the petals fall, drifting like snow, carpeting the ground. The bloom is brief, spectacular, and fleeting. And humans have built entire cultural practices around witnessing it, around being present for something so temporary. But the tree doesn't bloom for the viewers. The tree blooms because it's spring, because conditions are right, because it's time. The petals fall whether anyone is watching or not. The tree doesn't wait for appreciation, it just blooms. Some flowers change color as they age, signaling to pollinators which blooms still have nectar and which are done. It's efficiency disguised as beauty. Lantana flowers, for example, start yellow and turn orange, then red as they age. The color change tells the pollinators that the yellow flowers still have nectar, while the red flowers are spent. The pollinator focuses on the yellow flowers, conserving energy, maximizing efficiency. The color gradient creates a visual map, a guide that directs traffic within the plant. The flower isn't changing color for aesthetic reasons, it's changing color to communicate. The beauty is a side effect of communication. The pattern works because it's functional, and it's functional because it's clear. Certain plants emit sounds when they're stressed, ultrasonic clicks too high for human ears but detectable by insects and other plants. They're not silent, we're just not listening. When a plant is dehydrated or cut, it releases bubbles of air in its xylem, the tissue that transports water. Those bubbles create vibrations, ultrasonic clicks in the 20 to 100 kilohertz range, far above the range of human hearing. Researchers have recorded these sounds, though what they mean, if anything, is still under investigation. Some insects can detect sounds in that frequency range. Some plants might be able to as well. The plant might be communicating stress, warning neighbors, or the sounds might be incidental, just a byproduct of tissue damage. Either way, the plant is not silent. It's making noise. We just can't hear it. The smell of rain on soil, that earthy scent called petrichor, comes partly from oils plants release during dry periods. When rain finally comes, those oils are freed into the air. The earth is exhaling. During droughts, plants release oils to slow water loss, coating leaves and soil. The oils accumulate, and when rain arrives, the water disturbs those oils, releasing them into the air along with geosmin, a compound produced by soil bacteria. The combination creates that distinctive smell, fresh and earthy, the scent of relief. The plants have been holding their breath, conserving, protecting, and the rain is the release. The oils lift into the air, the soil opens, and everything exhales. Petrichor is the smell of the earth letting go. Some vines grow in spirals, always turning the same direction, left or right depending on the species. They don't choose, it's written into them from the beginning. Morning glories spiral counterclockwise, honeysuckle spirals clockwise. The direction is genetic, determined before the seed even germinates. The vine doesn't decide which way to turn. It turns the way it was built to turn. The spiral helps the vine climb, wrapping around supports, distributing weight, maximizing contact. But the direction isn't random, it's fixed. A morning glory will never spiral clockwise. It can't. The pattern is encoded in its DNA. The vine follows the instructions it was given, turning the only way it knows how. A seed knows when to break open. It waits in darkness, sensing moisture, temperature, time. When the conditions align, it splits itself apart to become something new. The seed coat cracks. The embryo inside begins to grow, sending a root downward, a shoot upward. The seed destroys its own structure to create a plant. It's transformation through self-destruction. The seed has to break for the plant to emerge, and it does that at the right moment, not too early, not too late. The seed has mechanisms to detect moisture, to sense temperature, to measure time. It integrates all that information and makes a decision, or something like a decision. It breaks open,
It grows. The seed is no longer a seed. It's a plant. The transition is irreversible. There's no going back. Trees in a forest share sugars through their roots, feeding saplings that can't yet reach sunlight. The forest takes care of its young, even ones that aren't its own. Mature trees with full canopy access produce more sugars through photosynthesis than they need. They export some of that surplus through their roots into the mycorrhizal network, and that sugar is available to other plants connected to the same network. Saplings growing in deep shade, unable to photosynthesize effectively, receive sugars from larger trees. The forest is feeding its understory, supporting young plants until they can support themselves. The trees don't get anything in return, not immediately. It's investment in the future. The forest maintains itself by supporting its next generation. The trees don't distinguish between their own offspring and others. They just feed the network, and the network feeds the young. Flowers don't try to be symmetrical. When they are, it's because symmetry happened to work. When they're not, that worked too. Radial symmetry, bilateral symmetry, asymmetry, all of them show up in different flowers for different reasons. Radial symmetry, like in a daisy or a rose, allows pollinators to approach from any direction. Bilateral symmetry, like in orchids or snapdragons, guides pollinators to specific landing spots, controlling how they enter the flower. Asymmetry is rare but exists, usually in response to specific environmental pressures or pollinator behaviors. The flower doesn't aim for symmetry. It develops the structure that works for its particular situation. Sometimes that's symmetrical, sometimes it's not. The flower doesn't care. It's functional, not aesthetic. Some plants can live for thousands of years. Ancient bristlecone pines were already old when the pyramids were being built. They're still growing. The oldest known bristlecone pine, named Methuselah, is over 4,800 years old. It was a sapling when humans were just beginning to develop writing. It has lived through empires, through wars, through climate shifts, through everything, and it's still alive. It grows slowly, adding microscopic rings each year, weathering harsh conditions, surviving in places where most plants can't. The tree doesn't think about its age, it just grows, year after year, decade after decade, century after century. It's not trying to be ancient, it's just continuing, and the continuation has outlasted almost everything else. Cacti store water in their flesh, turning themselves into reservoirs in places where rain is a rare visitor. The cactus doesn't hoard water out of greed, it hoards water out of necessity. The thick skin, the reduced leaves, the shallow but widespread root systems, all of it is designed to capture and hold moisture in an environment that offers almost none. The cactus can go months, sometimes years, without rain, surviving on what it stored from the last rainfall. When rain does come, the cactus drinks deeply, its tissues swelling, its body expanding to hold as much as possible. And then it waits, patient, still, a living water tower in the desert, standing alone, prepared for drought, always prepared. The cactus doesn't worry about when the next rain will come. It simply holds what it has and continues. Some flowers smell different at different times of day, adjusting their scent to match the schedule of their pollinators. A flower might be faintly scented in the morning, strongly scented in the afternoon, and scentless by evening. Or it might reverse that pattern, saving its fragrance for nighttime moths. The scent isn't constant because the audience isn't constant. The flower is energy efficient, releasing scent only when the right pollinator is active. It's the botanical equivalent of opening a shop only during business hours. No point in advertising when no one's around to respond. The flower tracks time through internal mechanisms tied to light and temperature, adjusting its scent production accordingly. It's not conscious scheduling, it's adaptive rhythm. The flower knows, in its own way, when to speak and when to stay quiet.
Leaves turn colors in autumn because the green is being withdrawn, revealing what was underneath all along. Chlorophyll, the pigment that makes leaves green and enables photosynthesis, breaks down as daylight shortens. As the green fades, other pigments become visible. Carotenoids, which were always there, show through as yellow and orange. Anthocyanins, produced in autumn in response to sunlight and cool temperatures, create reds and purples. The colors aren't new, the green was just covering them. Autumn isn't the tree dying, it's the tree revealing what it hid all summer. The reds and yellows were there in July, masked by the overwhelming presence of chlorophyll. Now the mask is gone. The tree isn't changing, it's uncovering, and what it uncovers is what was always there, waiting beneath the green. Some seeds need fire to germinate, lying dormant until a wildfire cracks them open and clears the competition. Certain pine cones are serotinous, meaning they stay closed for years, sealed with resin, holding their seeds inside. Only the heat of a fire can melt the resin and release the seeds. After a fire, when the forest floor is cleared and sunlight reaches the ground unobstructed, those seeds germinate en masse. The fire that destroyed the forest also triggered its renewal. The seeds were waiting for catastrophe. They needed the destruction to have a chance. It's not that the plant wants fire, it's that the plant has adapted to survive in a place where fire is inevitable. The seeds don't fear the flames, they use them. Disaster is opportunity, if you're built for it. Flowers sometimes produce two types of blooms, one for show and one for function. Hydrangeas do this. The large, colorful structures we think of as petals are actually sterile, producing no seeds. They exist only to attract attention. The real flowers are tiny, clustered in the center, barely visible. The showy outer blooms draw pollinators in. The inner flowers do the actual work of reproduction. It's a division of labor. Some blooms advertise, some blooms produce. The plant invests in both because it needs both. The beautiful ones that catch your eye are a billboard. The ones you don't notice are the factory. And together, they create a system that works. The hydrangea isn't deceptive, it's practical. Beauty and function don't have to be the same thing. Grasses flower too, though you might never notice. Their blooms are small, plain, without petals or scent. Grass flowers don't need to be attractive because they're wind-pollinated. They release pollen into the air in massive quantities, letting the wind carry it to other grass flowers. There's no color, no nectar, no reason to draw attention. The flowers are minimal, just the reproductive structures exposed to the air, waiting for pollen to land. Grass doesn't care about beauty, it cares about efficiency. And for wind pollination, showy flowers would be a waste. The grass flowers quietly, constantly, in every lawn, every field, every roadside, and almost no one notices. The grass doesn't mind. It wasn't flowering for you anyway. Some trees produce fruit that's deliberately unpleasant until it's ready to be eaten. Unripe fruit is bitter, hard, sometimes toxic, discouraging animals from eating it before the seeds inside are mature. The tree needs the seeds to develop fully before they're dispersed. So the fruit is chemically defended, unappetizing, a clear signal, not yet. And then when the seeds are ready, the fruit changes. It softens, it sweetens. The defensive compounds break down. The fruit becomes appealing, even irresistible. Now animals eat it, carrying the seeds away, dispersing them to new locations. The timing is precise. The tree controls when the fruit is eaten by controlling when the fruit becomes edible. It's not generosity, it's strategy. The tree gives the fruit when giving the fruit serves the tree's purposes. Bamboo can grow 3 feet in a single day, faster than almost any other plant on Earth. You can watch it grow if you're patient enough. The growth is visible in real time, the shoots elongating hour by hour, pushing upward with relentless energy. Bamboo achieves this speed by growing through cell expansion rather than cell division. The cells are created underground in the rhizome, and when the shoot emerges, those cells simply expand, stretching like a telescope extending. It's not building new structures, it's unfolding structures that were already built. The bamboo has been preparing for this growth spurt for months, maybe years, storing resources underground. And when the moment comes, it grows explosively, faster than anything else around it. The speed isn't reckless, it's the result of extensive preparation. The bamboo waited, and then it didn't. Some flowers track the movement of the sun across the sky throughout the day, then reset at night to face east again by dawn. Young sunflowers do this, turning their heads to follow the sun from sunrise to sunset. It's not just phototropism, it's circadian rhythm combined with directional growth. During the day, the stem grows more on the shaded side, pushing the flower toward the sun. At night, the stem grows more on the opposite side, turning the flower back to face east. By morning, the flower is ready to greet the sun as it rises. As the sunflower matures, it stops tracking and faces east permanently. The mature flower benefits from early morning warmth, which attracts more pollinators. The tracking was developmental, not permanent. The sunflower followed the sun when it needed to. Now it knows which direction matters most.
Thorns are modified branches designed to protect without costing much energy. A thorn is sharp, hard, structural, emerging directly from the woody tissue of the plant. It's not decorative, it's defensive. The thorn discourages herbivores, animals that might eat the leaves, flowers, or fruit. A deer might avoid a thorny plant in favor of something easier to eat. The plant with thorns gets left alone. The investment in thorns is small compared to the cost of constantly replacing eaten tissue. The thorns are a one-time expense that pays off repeatedly. The plant isn't aggressive, it's just protected. The thorns don't attack, they deter, and that deterrence is often enough. Most animals learn quickly which plants have thorns and which don't. The plant with thorns survives because other creatures remember the pain. Some plants are carnivorous, supplementing their nutrient intake by trapping and digesting insects. Venus flytraps, sundews, pitcher plants, they grow in nutrient-poor soils where nitrogen is scarce. So they get nitrogen from another source, the bodies of insects. The Venus flytrap snaps shut when trigger hairs are touched twice in quick succession. The sundew's sticky droplets trap insects that land on its leaves. The pitcher plant lures insects into a fluid-filled cavity where they drown and decompose. The plant absorbs the nutrients from the insect's body, supplementing what it can't get from the soil. It's not aggression, it's adaptation. The plant isn't hunting, it's farming. The insects are a crop, cultivated and harvested as needed. The carnivorous plant still photosynthesizes. It's still a plant. It just has an additional food source, a backup plan for surviving in places where the soil offers almost nothing. Lichen is not a single organism. It's a symbiotic partnership between a fungus and an alga or cyanobacterium. The fungus provides structure and protection. The alga provides food through photosynthesis. Neither could survive alone in the environments where lichen thrives. Together, they colonize bare rock, tree bark, Arctic tundra, places where almost nothing else grows. Lichen grows slowly, sometimes just millimeters per year, but it's patient. It can live for centuries, expanding gradually, covering surfaces that seem inhospitable to life. The partnership is so tightly integrated that scientists used to think lichen was a single species. It's not. It's two organisms living as one, each dependent on the other, each contributing what the other lacks. The lichen isn't one thing or the other, it's both, and it works. Some trees send up shoots from their roots when the main trunk is cut down, refusing to die as long as the root system survives. Aspen trees do this extensively, creating what looks like a forest of individual trees, but is actually a single organism connected underground. If one trunk is damaged or cut, the roots send up new shoots.
the tree persists. The visible part may be destroyed, but the essential part, the part underground, remains. And from that foundation, new growth emerges. The tree doesn't give up. It doesn't accept death when the trunk falls. It just starts over, sending up new trunks, new branches, new leaves. The forest continues. What looks like many trees is one tree, repeated, persistent, unkillable, as long as the roots remain. Flowers close when rain approaches, protecting their pollen from being washed away. The plant senses changes in humidity, barometric pressure, maybe even the quality of light, and responds by closing its petals. The closure happens before the rain starts, sometimes hours before. The flower is predicting the weather, or at least responding to early signs that humans often miss. When the petals close, the pollen stays dry, protected inside the flower. The flower can't reproduce if the pollen is destroyed by rain, so it closes. It waits, and when the rain passes and conditions improve, the flower opens again. The closure isn't random, it's responsive. The flower is protecting what matters, adjusting to conditions in real time, making small decisions that affect its survival. Some plants grow in salt water, tolerating conditions that would kill most other vegetation. Mangroves thrive in coastal areas where salt concentrations are high, using specialized root systems that filter out salt or excrete it through their leaves. The mangrove doesn't avoid salt, it manages salt. It has adapted to live in a place where few competitors exist, carving out a niche in an environment that would be lethal to most plants. The mangrove's roots stabilize coastlines, prevent erosion, create habitats for fish and birds. The tree provides more than just its own survival. It creates an ecosystem, and it does that in a place most plants can't even enter. The mangrove isn't avoiding challenges, it's thriving in them. Seeds travel in ways that seem almost designed for adventure. Some have wings, spinning like helicopters as they fall, drifting far from the parent plant. Some have hooks that catch on animal fur, hitching rides to new locations. Some are encased in fruit that animals eat, carrying the seeds in their digestive systems before depositing them elsewhere. Each method is specific, tailored to the plant's environment and the resources available. The plant can't move, but its seeds can. The seeds are explorers, sent out into the world with no map, no guide, just structural features that give them a chance to travel. Most won't make it, but a few will, and those few will grow in places the parent plant never reached. The seeds are the future, scattered, hopeful, traveling on wind and fur and water to destinations unknown. Some flowers produce nectar at the base of long tubes, accessible only to pollinators with long tongues. Trumpet flowers, honeysuckle, certain orchids, they create nectar wells that shallow-tongued insects can't reach. The flower is filtering its visitors, selecting for specific pollinators that are most effective at transferring pollen. A bee with a short tongue can't reach the nectar, so it doesn't visit. A moth with a long proboscis can reach it, so it does. The flower gets the pollinated by the right species, the one that visits similar flowers and will carry pollen to them. It's selective, it's efficient. The flower doesn't welcome everyone, it welcomes the guests that can actually help. The long tube isn't a barrier, it's a filter, and it works. Forests smell different in different seasons because the chemical composition of the air changes as plants go through their cycles. In spring, the scent is fresh, green, full of growth hormones and volatile compounds released by new leaves. In summer, the air is thick with the scent of flowers, fruit, and the slower release of oils from mature foliage. In autumn, the smell shifts to earthy, rich,
as leaves fall and begin to decompose, releasing different compounds. In winter, the scent is muted, cleaner, with less biological activity. You're not imagining the difference. The forest is chemically distinct in each season. The air itself changes composition as the plants change their activities. The forest is speaking in chemistry, and the language shifts with the calendar.
Some seeds require passage through an animal's digestive system to germinate, depending on stomach acids to break down protective coatings. The seed is designed to survive digestion, to be eaten, processed, and excreted, emerging in a new location surrounded by nutrient-rich fertilizer. The animal eats the fruit, digests the flesh, and deposits the seed miles away from where it started. The seed couldn't germinate on its own. It needed the chemical treatment of the digestive process to weaken its shell, to make germination possible. The plant has evolved to be eaten, to pass through a predator unharmed, to use that predator as a dispersal vehicle. It's mutualism disguised as consumption. The animal gets food, the plant gets distribution, and the seed gets a chemical treatment it couldn't perform on itself. Petals aren't always what they seem. In some flowers, what looks like petals are actually modified leaves or sepals, colored and shaped to mimic true petals. Poinsettias, for instance, have tiny yellow flowers in the center, while the red structures everyone admires are specialized leaves called bracts. The plant has repurposed leaves to do the work of petals, creating color and attraction without investing in floral structures. It's efficient, it's adaptive. The plant uses what it has to create what it needs. The bracts look like petals, function like petals, but they're not petals. The plant doesn't care about accurate terminology. It cares about results. And the red bracts work. They attract attention. They draw pollinators. The flower is tiny and insignificant, but the bracts make sure no one misses it. Some trees communicate danger in the air, releasing chemicals when they're being eaten that warn nearby trees to increase their defenses. When an acacia tree starts feeding on an acacia tree, the tree releases ethylene into the air. Nearby acacias detect the ethylene and respond by producing tannins in their leaves, making the leaves bitter and less nutritious. The giraffe moves on, seeking easier meals. The trees have warned each other. The signal is chemical, airborne, immediate. The trees can't run, can't hide, can't fight directly, but they can warn their neighbors, and they can make themselves less appealing. The communication is simple but effective. One tree is attacked, it sends a signal. Other trees prepare. The defense is collective. The forest protects itself by sharing information, by treating an attack on one tree as a threat to all.